Good morning, I'm Andre from Peak Motorcycles, and this video is my first ride video for my Kove 450 Rally that you can just see there over my shoulder. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about the bike or show it you right now, just because I've done a separate video for that, and if you want to see it up close, please check that out. So what this video will be is me saying what this bike is like on the road. So this is a production bike. This is not one of the pre-production prototypes that are round and out and about in the world. This is my bike, which I picked up last week from the importer here in the UK. So I'm in the Peak District. If you're not familiar with this part of England, it's the north of England between Sheffield and Manchester. And in this video, I'm going to ride it out of the Edale Valley. There's some narrow, twisty country roads, some quite steep hills. I'm then going to find the one bit of 70-mile-an-hour road that there is around here, which is the A6 that runs up to Whaley Bridge. So I'll see what it's like at speed. I will then ride over to Buxton, see what it's like in some town traffic. And then if I find any other interesting roads along the way, I'll see how it behaves on there. So if you're looking for a out-and-out enduro video, seeing this racing through the sand dunes, I'm really sorry, but this is not it. There's plenty of other videos out there of that for people who really know what they're doing, where they actually have that terrain. But this is very much to see what it's like as a road bike. Mine is registered for use on the road here. I'm going to use it as an adventure bike where I can ride some trails with it, and I can also ride between the trails on pavement when I need to. So hopefully all that makes sense, and I will get underway. Here we go. Right then, here we go. Right, power on. Get the nice little Kove thing on the dash. Put it in neutral. And away we go. Started first time, that's always a good sign. So my very first impressions are, I can certainly feel the seat. It's not as hard as some I've ridden, but it's also not particularly soft. The riding position for me, this is without bar risers, is actually really comfortable, seated. I'll do a trail ride video on it at some point, and then I'll also have a go standing, but the geometry feels pretty good. The screen, I did wonder whether some of the writing would be a little bit small, and I think it is, but even with my failing eyesight I can read it okay. The gearing is quite low. You can see right now I'm doing 2,500–3,000 revs, 25 miles an hour, and it will pull from fourth. Now the red line is all the way up at 9,000 RPM, so I'm sure based on that third gear or fourth gear will take me up to 70. As long as it pulls all the way up, but I'll certainly explore that and find out as I go. The stock mirrors that are on the bike now, they weren't on when I did my video the other day, are actually surprisingly good. They're nothing special, but somehow they don't look, sometimes you get the free mirrors, the ones that come with a bike, and they just look a little bit cheap. I mean, here they are very functional. They've got very short arms on them, but actually I can easily see past my shoulders on both sides. This exhaust certainly has a sound to it. To about here, back to 4,000 RPM, it's not too bad. But as soon as I give it some throttle from here, that definitely is quite a fun noise. I don't know how good that is for actually trail riding here in the UK, where a lot of noise attracts attention. The only other thing that I'll mention is that if you're looking for a performance test where I ride this bike to its limit, this isn't going to be that video either. This bike is pretty much brand new to me. It's got new tyres, fresh out the mould. It's got new brakes that haven't really been broken in yet. I don't know if you can actually hear me over the sound of that exhaust, because that does sound pretty loud. That's in fourth gear, that's 6,000 RPM, 50 miles an hour. Fifth, also pulling up this hill, but again, it's really noisy. As soon as you come off the throttle, it quietens right down, if you can hear that. And then as soon as I just give it a little bit of a twist, that sound just comes through. But there we go. Drop down again. And then above about 5,000 revs, it's almost like you hit a power band. So just through there, that's really on the sweet spot for the engine. And you just got that extra bit of go. Now I'm sure it'll rev up a whole lot higher than that as well. Let's see what we'll do up here. I mean, I'm only in fourth, and that'll easily pull. I just need to give it a little dab of throttle, and fourth gear will pull me up here. easily hit 50 in fourth coming up this hill, and this is about a 20%, like a 1 in 5 incline. The suspension on the bike actually feels quite firm. I didn't know if it was going to feel a little bit soft, and certainly when I got my CRF 300 it was very soft, especially for somebody of my size. This feels quite the opposite, so I don't know whether that's just firmer suspension for the road or for racing. I suspect it's the latter. But nevertheless, it's quite a pleasant surprise. If anything, I think it could do with some tuning and some setup for me and my weight, really to get the most out of this. So I suspect that will be the subject of another video. Oh, I do love the sound of that. I mean, yeah, it probably is a little bit loud for trail riding. So all my trail riding brethren here in the UK, if you're wincing a bit when you think that's an loud exhaust, yeah, I kind of know what you mean. But maybe there's something that can be done about that. Anyway, right, I think that's enough of me talking through this bit. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to head over to the A6, see what it's like on a dual carriageway, and crank it up to 70. So what I have noticed is this certainly has way more pickup than my CRF 300. I mean, I know it should, right? It's got nearly double the power. But even from fourth gear, if I slow right down, maybe we can go to third. So the pickup from, what's that, 25 miles an hour, if I just open the throttle in third, it just goes 50. Yeah, it's certainly got plenty of go, no doubt about that at all. So I was going to do the next bit of some high-speed stuff on the dual carriageway, but as it's a bit quieter here, it might be an easier time to talk. So I've only been doing sort of 50 miles an hour-ish, 6th gear, and I am getting a little bit of wobble from the front wheel. Not a lot, but enough that I don't think it's the road surface. I think it is the bike. Now, I did notice that these wheels do come with rim locks fitted, and I didn't see any weights on the wheels. So what I'm wondering is if the wheels could do with balancing, certainly the front wheel. So I think that what I might do, and again that will be probably a separate video, is I'll take the front wheel off. I do have like a balancing stand, so I'll put that on, see if I can, put some weights on, try and get that to turn freely, and then put it back on the bike and see if this wobble goes away. It's not bad. It's not, to be honest, initially I thought it was just the road surface rather than the bike, but it almost seems to be too consistent and ever present. But another thing to point out, that cruising here at 50, it's actually really comfortable and it's really quiet. There is a bit of wind buffeting. That screen really doesn't come up that far, but the engine is, just whisper quiet when it's like this. I mean, the difference between this and when I open up the throttle is huge. But it is slightly comforting to know that certainly if you're cruising at 50 miles an hour, let's see what it's like at 60 or 70 later on, but certainly at 50 it is a fairly comfortable and quiet place to be. So I'm now on the A6 just near Chapel on the Frith. But there's a bit more of a wobble. You can see it's actually these yellow lines on the road as I approach this roundabout. But coming off the other side of here, it is a 70 mile an hour limit, so it'll give me a chance to see what the bike is like at speed. It's also worth pointing out that the brakes are really good. They seem to have just got a huge amount of feel, even though they're pretty much brand new pads that still need to be bedded in. But yeah, I've been really impressed with just how the brakes feel and the confidence that gives. Right, here we go. Third gear, fourth. I mean, it'll easily hit 70 in fifth. So this is now just seeing what it's like to sit at 70. There's a fair bit of wind buffeting. I can definitely feel that vibration that I mentioned from the front wheel, and it's even more accentuated at 70. It's doing just over 6,000 revs. There's quite a bit of noise. I don't know if you can quite hear that coming through. I definitely think I need to balance that front wheel. Otherwise, 65, maybe 70 is just when it's starting to get proper noisy. So I'm wondering whether just a slight change in the gearing for road use, maybe going down a couple of teeth on the rear cog, will just lift that up, because there's certainly plenty of go. I mean, without a downshift, if I just open the throttle, it will take off and it will accelerate. If I drop it down to fifth and do the same, I mean, it's not going to do you any injuries. I'm sure it'll do it even more in fourth, but actually I don't really want to rev it that much. So if you want to know what it's like at speed at 70, I think it's okay, but there is some wind buffeting. I do need to change the balance of the front wheel, and there is quite a lot of noise from the exhaust whenever you open the throttle. I'm not sure with this exactly how it's come, how far I wish to ride, but what I will do is I'll try and address these things and then give it another go. I would say that out of the box, 60, 65 miles an hour. I don't know what that is, 110 maybe, 105, 110 kilometers an hour. It's quite a comfortable place to be, and it's quite quiet. As soon as you push it up to 70, it does get a lot noisier and does get quite a lot more uncomfortable. I'll give it one more go. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, it's not as settled. I mean, I think the suspension's fine, but I think it is definitely that front wheel wobble, which is unsettling the bike a bit and makes it not that comfortable. It's bizarre that it's actually okay at 60, but at 70 it just feels like it's just pushing that little bit too much. I've just ridden up through Whaley Bridge, which is a small town not far from where I live. I've filled the petrol tank all the way up to the top, so it's got the full 31 litres in the rear tank and the 2 forward tanks. So I'm slightly curious to see just how long this fuel will last. The fuel gauge is now showing as full. What I did find was that for riding through the town, it is surprisingly docile. I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, if you just want to have a plot around town at low revs, it's very easy. The steering is very sharp, the clutch is very light, the brakes are very progressive, and yeah, it's. I think if you're going to have one of these for riding around a city, I know that's definitely not what they're made for, but it's something that people have to do. Sometimes that's where people live. Just coming out into a 50 zone, and there's that sound again. Yeah, so this is the road that runs from Whaley Bridge over to Buxton. It's a great biking road, lots of nice bends, 50 mile an hour limit. So I'm just going to have a run over this and see what it's like on a faster A road here in the UK. So I'm only a bit of a way up here, and actually it's surprisingly fun on road. I wasn't sure how with that big front wheel, how that handling would measure up, but on these bends, yeah, it's really quite fun. I mean, I'm not pushing on. Like I said, it's brand new tyres, straight out the mould, new brakes. But it's fun enough, and yeah, I did wonder whether the steering might also feel a little bit sharp, but it's just perfect. It's actually really fun, other than the noise, which is a little bit loud. I'm riding this on the tyres that came on the bike. They don't quite look like sort of full-on enduro blocks. They are a bit more sort of adventure tyres. But they seem to be fine. I've not had any moment where I actually thought there was excessive vibration from the tyres, or if you know, I actually had a problem with grip. Now the road is mostly dry, but it really is great fun to just come out and have a play on these twisty roads on this bike. I'm genuinely impressed and pleased. And again, to come back to what I mentioned earlier, you know, to potter along at 50 miles an hour is really quiet. You know, it's certainly quite a comfortable bike. And the fact that it's got this sort of Jekyll and Hyde personality, where when you're, you know, riding at 40, 50, it'll just cruise, and then as soon as you get above 5,000, 6,000 revs and open the throttle, yeah, it really gets a growl on. It does have some torque low down, but yeah, probably not a huge amount. I think it's definitely a bike you have to ride up and down through the gears, or certainly to try and keep it in that noisier power band. So I was going to ride through Buxton and have a bit of a feel for what it was like for town riding, except I don't know if you can see all these yellow cones on my left, but it's Buxton Carnival Day today. Today is the 8th of July 2023, so the town centre is actually closed, so I think I'm going to have to go and find another town to ride slowly. Although having said that, riding through this traffic here gives me enough of a go at it. I'm just in third gear coming down a hill. Throttle is very, very easy. And yeah, the bike feels quite narrow. I mean, it is quite tall, but I think for riding in traffic, this certainly seems to be, yeah, easy enough. So one thing I'm finding is that it's quite blustery today. There's a bit of some gusting wind, and I think there's a combination between it being, you know, a very upright bike, you know, me on it and all my riding gear, and the lack of weight on the bike. So I can definitely feel, you know, the blustery conditions. I compare this to something like my GS, where I'm probably sitting a bit lower inside the bike compared to this, plus where it's got all that weight low down, and actually just the weight of the bike itself just helps to keep it upright through crosswinds. You know, on here I'm definitely feeling, you know, a bit more of it. I guess that's expected, and for those of you that ride enduro bikes a lot, maybe that's something you're more familiar with. But nevertheless, I thought it was worth mentioning. So I think that's quite enough fun for now. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call into the old smithy in Monash, park up, and give you my halfway thoughts. I've done about just coming up to 30 miles on it so far. I'm about halfway round, and I've stopped here at the old Smithy tea rooms in Monash. For any of you who have been riding in the Peak District, this might be a familiar haunt. It's coming on to being later in the day now, and there's actually not that many bikes here, so yeah, I can record a little bit of video without too many people jumping in the background. So my first thoughts are mostly positive. Yeah, it's a really easy bike to ride on road. The gearing is, it's probably a little bit low for road riding, but that's something that could easily be changed with a new rear sprocket. I haven't found a single false neutral. The gearbox is very smooth despite being brand new. The clutch is very light, the brakes are very good despite not really being bedded in yet. Not had any problems with the tyres despite them being brand new. So all of that is pretty good. I think there's a few things which I think could be improved. So I've definitely got a bit of a wobble on the front end, and I'm wondering if that front wheel needs balancing, given that it's got that rim lock on the front wheel. So I'll try that when I get home, see if that can address it. There was one point where I did an overtake, and I did get a very, very slight steering wobble as I came through it. So I'm wondering whether putting a steering damper on it, I know if you get the factory one, the racing one, it comes with a steering damper, and there is a bracket on the bike to put it on. So, you know, I'll keep riding it, I'll see if I can make it do it again. If it's something where I think a steering damper would help, I'll certainly think about putting one on. The exhaust is quiet enough, probably up to 50 miles an hour when you're cruising. As soon as you open the throttle, it is loud. I mean, I've got earplugs in when I'm riding, and I still feel like it's a bit too loud. And I think certainly for trail riding in the UK, where loud exhausts don't really help anyone, that would be quite annoying. So I'm wondering whether there is something that can be done about that to quieten it down. I know that's not a very common thing for people to do with bikes. Generally people try and make them louder, not quieter, but I think it is pretty loud. And this is the standard version. This is the one that has the catalytic converter, so it does have the restricted airflow that takes a couple of horsepower off. But nevertheless, I think it is something that I'd probably look to do further down the line if I'm going to use it for trail riding. So all in all, yeah, I would say it's a positive. I've done some twisty lanes, I've done a bit of town riding, and so far it's done exactly what I wanted from it. I've not had the fans come on yet, so clearly I've not been riding it too hot. Maybe that will come later on. So yeah, I'm going to get back on the road now. I'm going to try and do a few more roads on the way home, see if I can pick up some other traffic. Anyway, yeah, more fun to come. So I've had my coffee stop in Monash and recorded a little bit to the camera, and I've just set off again, and it has just started raining a little bit. I don't know if you can just about see the spots on my visor or on the windscreen, but I suppose this gives me an opportunity to see what the weather protection is like. If we didn't ride in the rain in the UK, we wouldn't ride at all. So just from watching a few of the droplets coming off the windscreen, they all seem to be coming off sideways, which I guess is a good thing. So because of the shape of it, it's curved more sort of round to the sides rather than up and over the top, so there doesn't seem to be much buffeting really that's coming off that. I can't see any water droplets coming off the top of the screen. They are all coming off to the sides. I don't know if that means I'm going to get wet shoulders, but certainly from an airflow perspective, that's quite promising. One thing I have noticed is that I don't think the fuel gauge is particularly reliable. I mean, it's showing now that I'm down to about 3/4 of a tank, and I filled it up to the top, like completely brimmed all 3 tanks to 31 litres. So I'm fairly sure that I'm not at 3/4. I must be nearly full. I've only done about 20 miles since I filled it up. So I will keep an eye on it, but maybe it's one of those things that you learn to know what the actual graduations mean. I mean, I'm sure it's an engineering nightmare trying to work out exactly how much fuel is in the bike across the 3 tanks. But nevertheless, I guess I just need to make sure that I know when I'm nearly run out. Maybe I'll start just using the trip meter just to work out how far I've gone, and when I get used to how much I actually need from a tank. I don't think there is a low fuel light, but I think there's a low fuel message that would come up. But yeah, the gauge itself doesn't seem to be particularly reliable. So I did find another bit of town to ride through. So I'm just coming through Bakewell, which is quite a sort of pretty market town here in the Peak District. If you're familiar with Bakewell puddings, this is where they're from. And yeah, I just thought this would be an opportunity just to see what it is like at low speeds. So I did mention it earlier, I think when I'd been through the outskirts of Buxton. It does seem very controllable. And I don't know if you can hear it and see on the rev counter, I'm only doing sort of 3,000-ish revs. But it's very responsive. The clutch is super light, super easy to pull in. And yeah, riding at these sorts of speeds seems quite easy. One thing I have noticed is there's quite a lot of engine braking, which can make it a little bit juddery if you're not smooth enough on the throttle, but for the most part this hasn't been a problem for me. So the rain is a bit on and off at the moment. As you can see, the road is sort of slightly greasy. What I have been quite impressed by is these tyres. I've not had any wiggling around yet, not even under throttle, even on these bits that look a little bit greasy. And I suppose with modern tyre compounds these days you shouldn't really expect it, but it was a brand I've never heard of. They're tyres I've never used before, and I must admit I was a little bit uncertain as to how well they would perform on these more slippery bits. Anyway, I've been riding for another while. I'm up to 65 miles now, so I think I'm just going to call into Grindleford station for another cup of tea. I've just left Grindleford Cafe. I'm heading back up to the tops really. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is go and have a bit of a suspension test. Now this isn't anything particularly scientific, and it's not going to be off-road either, but there is a stretch of road which runs from, well, it's over on the left from here. It's the road that runs up from Palisage and runs up to the Burbage Bridge, which is quite a rough surface. I mean, it is paved, but you know, it's I quite often take bikes up there just to see how the suspension behaves, because even though it's a smooth surface, it really is quite bumpy. And I'll be interested to see how this suspension, just in its stock form, exactly as it came from the factory, no specific setup for me, just to see how that behaves. This is the stretch of road where I like to give the suspension a go. As you can see, it is paved, it does look fairly flat, but you can see how the bike is moving around underneath me. The surface itself is far from smooth, far from level. So I'll just go up here, I'll just ride up, and there's a few of these sort of little dips and things as I go. I don't know if you can still hear me over the sound of the exhaust, because I'm sure that is rasping away pretty loudly just behind me. Now, so far so good. When I came up here on some bikes that have got less fancy suspension, you really do get, you know, rocked around a lot. I mean, there's a bit of a bump coming up through this little section here. There's a few dips, a bit there, but no, you know what, it's not bouncing. It is maybe a little hard, but I'd felt that previously when I'd been coming up, riding up some of the other roads. But it's not bouncing. You know, the damping is working. The damping really is just, you know, it bounces once and settles just like that. And again, you know, you don't get that oscillation that comes afterwards that can be a bit unsettling. And the suspension on this bike is made by a company called Yuan, Y-U-A-N. Not a brand I'm familiar with. I believe they're Chinese. It is fully adjustable. So I think at some point I will take the trouble or take the time to go through and actually, you know, sort it all out, have a really good go at setting the suspension up just for me. But until then, this actually seems to be pretty good. Like I said, it is a little hard if anything, but actually that's not too much of a problem. I think I've done enough road riding for now, and while I think this video is long enough, I think I'm now going to do a little bit of a trail, which I'll put up as a separate video. For those of you that recognise this bit of road, this is the road from Burbage that runs into Sheffield. I think it's Ringlow Road, and there's a short section of the Trans-Euro Trail just here on my right, which is the Houndkirk Road. So this is going to cut out after this. There we go through here. So I'm just going to ride this, and I'll put that in a separate video as a first trail ride. Should be fun. Right then, I think that's quite enough of that. If you want to see my trail ride video, that will go up the day after the road riding video. So if you're anything other than on day one, it'll be up already, and I'll put a link in this video. But yeah, that was really fun. I'm just going to head back to the main road now, which is just down here, and then I think I'm going to ride home. I don't think there's a great deal else to say. Hopefully I've covered off some of the things. If you've got any questions, please stick them in the comments. I will try and answer everything as well as I can. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be more to come. This is very much first ride, first look, first go, just really getting used to the bike, and it's been a pleasure. Actually, coming down here, I did think of one more thing, and that is that there's a surprising amount of engine braking. You know, more than I would have expected from a 4-stroke 450 single like this. You know, coming down here, lots of these, you know, bends there. You know, it's just controlling your speed as you come in and getting on the throttle when you come out is just a fun way to enjoy the Peak District. But yeah, just being able to drop it down even in like 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and it's just does a lot of the work. And yeah, maybe I didn't expect it to be quite as involved as that, but it certainly helps. I'm used to using a lot of engine braking when I'm riding my GS, but I'd expect that from a 1250 Boxer. less so from a comparatively small single. Back home in Edale. So when I get back, I'll just give you my final thoughts. One thing I have just noticed that I will work out is that there is this fuel consumption gauge which says that I've used 1.8 gallons per 100 miles. That is not a unit of measure that I'm familiar with. So if you leave it to metric, you get litres per 100 kilometres, which I think people are used to. And what I'm normally used to with imperial or with non-metric measures is miles per gallon. But what they've done is they've switched the litres for gallons and the 100 kilometres for 100 miles. So when I get back, I will look up how much 1.8 gallons per 100 miles is and convert that to mpg, and I will put that in here together with how many litres per 100 kilometres. Hopefully this makes sense. So that is it. I made it safely back home, and yeah, it was really fun. Now, if you've watched the video, this is going to be some repetition. I know some people just skip to the end so they don't have to sit through it, and frankly I don't blame you. So good things. Gearbox is great, really smooth, didn't get a single false neutral, just clicked up and down throughout. Clutch really light, really easy to control, especially pulling away in first, even on loose sand. Engine power is also fine. You know, there's plenty there both for road and trail. The suspension, I thought it was kind of hard, but actually it worked pretty well on the trail as well. I think I can do some setup specifically for me, so I will look to do that to make it even better, but honestly, didn't really need it. Tyre pressures as well, I think they're probably set to road pressures, so for trail riding I can probably drop that down a bit. The bike already has rim locks fitted, so yeah, it's just playing around to see what works. I didn't have any mud today, so really the higher pressures for that rock works quite well. There were a few things which weren't perfect, that weren't great even. So the first one was that there was a bit of a wobble from the front wheel. So the front wheel does have a rim lock installed, but what it doesn't have is any balance weight. So I think the front wheel needs to be balanced to get rid of that wiggle. Another thing which may be related to the front wheel balance was that a couple of times at speed I did find there was a little bit of a sort of side to side wobble on the bike. Not a tank slapper, nothing even close to that, but nevertheless something that just made me think, yeah, it's not quite as it should be. So there is a fitting to put a steering damper on, so maybe I'll look to get one of those to put that on. There was another thing which I thought was a problem, but actually I don't think it is. So I think the bike is pretty loud. When you open the throttle all the way above maybe 5,000 or 6,000 revs, it's got a real, you know, solid sound to it, which is okay. I had earplugs in, but I do think it's kind of loud. And my worry was how that would behave on trails. Now there's another video coming out after this one, which will be a trail ride I did, part of the Trans-Euro trail on the bike. Spoiler alert, but what I did find was actually it wasn't too noisy. I mean, to ride on trails like that where they're shared with horses and dog walkers and cyclists, it's quite easy to just yeah, you know, you don't need to use the upper part of the rev range. There's more than enough go in first, second, third, fourth gear, up to sort of 3,000, 4,000 revs. There's lots of tractability in there, and for trail riding I think that's kind of perfect. So even though in this video I think I said a few times I think this is too loud for trail riding, I would like to retract those comments. So anyway, I hope that's been interesting and useful. If it has, please check out my other content about my Kove 450 and anything else. If you have any questions, by all means stick them in the comments. I think what I might do at some point is do like a Q&A video, because people have asked me about all sorts of things from the battery to the mounting point of the exhaust. So if you've got any more questions, I'll collect them all up and maybe I'll do a video just specifically answering all of those questions that people have raised. Thanks for watching. Maybe I'll see you next time.